Welcome to another episode of the Einstein Retirement Daily, where we curate financial, economic, and market news for the headlines that affect today's retiree. Coming up on today's episode, it's a new series that I'm going to start doing called Common Retirement Questions. Today's common retirement question: should I pay off my mortgage? More on this coming right up. As always, if you hear something in today's podcast that causes you to want to take some action, make some changes to your situation, please be advised that today's podcast should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Should you hear something today that causes you to want to take some action, while we're very honored that this information has been valuable to you and helpful to you, we do insist that you work with the appropriate tax, legal, or investment professional prior to making any changes. Article from Fox Business highlighting from Kelly Ramirez, highlighting that demand for mortgages are up, and largely because interest rates continue to go down and mortgage interest rates also are pretty down. So this kind of article, and there's several more just like it. In fact, today's news cycle is producing a lot of content around mortgage interest rates and how they are very low. And so I thought it was a good time for us to consider the question of, should I pay off my mortgage before I retire? This is one of the very most common questions that I hear from retirees, is questions about, should I get that mortgage paid off? I thought there's some tax benefit is a common addendum. I don't want to have debt when I get retired. When I'm retired is a common addendum. I want to make sure my bills are low when I get into retirement. All these are very common things that I hear when folks ask the question. But the just very basic question, very common question is, should I pay off my mortgage before I retire? Now, let me share with you a few thoughts that might be helpful in determining whether or not that's a great idea. Just at a baseline level, it's never a bad idea to do things that would help you get your bills lower as you proceed into retirement. That's never going to be a wrong decision. And the reason for that is because the more pressure you put on your investments, the more pressure you put on your income need from things like Social Security or pension dollars, the more bills you have to cover, the more at risk your retirement is. It's just like almost anything. The more variables you put into play, the more range of outcomes are possible. And so the possibility of having outcomes that are negative exists. For example, when you're retiring and you're going into retirement and you are now having your spending goals, and then you also have investments, and then you also have Social Security, and then you also have a pension, and then you also have a spouse, and then you also have inflation that you have to deal with, and you also have very high spending goals or lots of different spending goals. All of these variables working together generally are not working in your favor. Okay, the more variables, the more at risk you are for potentially running out of dollars later in life because of inflation or other things. So life is obviously very hard to predict, and so generally speaking, it is a good idea to get your spending goals down. Doing something like paying off a mortgage is a good way to get a particular spending goal down that is part of your, main source of living. Meaning, if you were to not pay off the mortgage and you run into financial difficulty down the road, now not only do you have financial difficulty, but you also are in jeopardy of losing your place that you're living. So having the mortgage paid off is certainly a good idea from the standpoint of sort of securing those baseline needs. Okay, so from a psychological and good feelings perspective, and from a legitimate taking care of your needs perspective, paying off a mortgage could be very helpful. Oftentimes when people ask me, should I pay off my mortgage in retirement, they are asking me this when they actually have the money to do it. Meaning the dollars are sitting there and they could liquidate those dollars, or maybe it's just all in cash, and they could go pay that mortgage off right now. So one thing that could be reasonable to do in a scenario like that would be to invest those dollars to some small degree in some low risk type of an investment and earn some interest on those dollars, but always knowing that you have the chunk of change to pay off the mortgage if you needed or wanted to. So the dollars are sitting there, they're working for you, you've invested them in some method or manner, but you've invested them in a way that's not at a lot of risk. And so or maybe even no risk, depending on the type of investment that you're selecting. So if you do it like that, and you maintain the mortgage because it fits into your bills, you have the income, maybe you, between Social Security, pension, and some interest or dividend income, you're really generating enough income to pay the mortgage. It's not like the mortgage is a problem. And so these dollars sitting over here, while it would be nice to pay off the mortgage perhaps, you would then lose the value of having that as a part of your net worth. So you don't want to lose the value of having that as a part of your net worth, investable net worth, because paying off the mortgage would increase your net worth on your mortgage side. But if you want to continue that investable, that liquid net worth, because we would not consider a house to be particularly liquid, although in today's housing market, maybe that's not a true statement. So pretty easy to sell a house these days. But the point is that if you want to maintain having those dollars, then just continue to pay the mortgage, invest those dollars, have those dollars work for you a little bit, but then always knowing that if push come to shove, you could just pay off that mortgage in an instant, in a sense. So the other thing that's often worth considering is that people want to pay off their mortgage because they want to reduce their bills. That's the primary motivation. I really want to get that mortgage paid off to reduce my bills in retirement. Well, one thing that you could consider is actually refinancing a mortgage. So you've got 10 years left on a mortgage. It was a 30-year mortgage. You've been paying on this thing forever. And you go, why in the heck would I refinance? I've been paying on this for God knows how long. I want to get it done. I'm only 10 years away, but I'm 2 years away from retirement. Maybe you're having some health issues. It's just not reasonable for you to continue to work, but you really were hoping to get this mortgage paid off before you retired. Well, this is sort of it's simultaneously gaining lots of popularity, but it's kind of an unpopular thing to say, and that is it would be to consider refinancing that mortgage and going out 30 years, reducing the bills, right? Because that's kind of the key. The key is I want to reduce my bills so that I'm not putting too much pressure on my investment accounts or my portfolio. I don't want to have to spend too much out of my investments to be retired. So considering a refinance might be the better option than, say, pulling a lot of money from your 401k. Okay, we got to be careful about that sort of thing. So you might have enough money saved up. Let's say you have a $500,000 401k. You have a $100,000 mortgage. After Social Security and pensions, you still have an income need of, let's call it $25,000 a year. So you need an additional $25,000 that you need to generate from that $500,000 401k. Well, that's 5%. That's a pretty strong spend rate. Now let's say that need drops down by 1%, down to a 4% rate if you didn't have a mortgage. Well, that's better, but the problem is that if you take out $100,000 from the 401k, first of all, it's not $100,000. You got to factor in taxes. So we're probably talking closer to $150,000 after state and federal taxes are all paid. So if you take $150,000, you're left with $350,000, and even at 4% on 500, which is $20,000 on $350,000 is actually more than 5% at this point. So that's not a great plan. You have to be very careful about this sort of thing. What could be a better plan? Refinancing that mortgage to where your spend rate drops down to, say, 4.5 or 4.25, depending on how low you can get that mortgage. Because you're still going to have your property taxes. You're still going to have your local taxes, okay, property taxes, and I feel like there's something else. Oh, insurance and property taxes. You're still going to have those expenses. So if you're able to drop the mortgage payment part, the interest and payment part down low enough, maybe you could even get that down to where your spending need is all the way down to 4.25, and on 500,000. So you still have your 500,000. So that can be a much more effective way to go and can give you the result you're looking for, which is to reduce your expenses, but without taking that big tax hit, simultaneously also really hurting your net worth. Feels good to have a mortgage paid off, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution and can put you at risk if you're not careful. So this is obviously a very individualized decision about whether or not you should, quote unquote, should pay off a mortgage. At the low interest rates we're seeing, if you have a high interest rate, probably worth considering a refinance, really probably worth it, because at the low interest rates we're seeing now, I don't want to say it's free money because you can't earn much in a savings account, you can't earn much in bonds right now. So you have to outpace that for it to truly be free money. And what I mean by that is, let's say that your mortgage is 2.5%. Well, your investments that you're not paying that mortgage off with need to be earning at least 2.5% for it to be quote unquote free. Whoops, I just knocked off my microphone here. For it to be quote unquote free money. So just be very mindful of that when you're making this decision. I hope this video has helped you today think through this. Again, very common question. And I do hope to do some more videos like this. As many of you know, my primary practice is as a retirement planner, and so I get a lot of questions from clients and those who are looking at becoming clients, and so this is something that I can speak to a lot. And if you have a particular question that you want me to focus on, obviously I have a lot, and I could sort them in my preferred order, but if you have a preferred order, leave us a comment and let us know what question you'd like us to tackle next. With that, we'll wrap up today's podcast. Look forward to seeing you next time. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page. I'll link the article from Fox Business in the description. Have a wonderful day.